boom. Gorilla stomping in a zoo. Check the vocals, animals gather right. Boom.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of our chicken coop build. So I hope you've been enjoying the content up to this point. I know some of the videos as of late have been getting a little bit long-winded in terms of duration, and there's a lot of people that just don't really have the attention span to stick it through to the end. But I'm hoping that by including as much as possible of this process, anyone looking to duplicate the project can likely do so based on what they watch. And it does end up being a good collection of long videos as a result. But it's kind of a trade-off. The information is there for those who seek it, and I'd rather that than just deprive everything down to short clips where it's just these flashes of the project becoming completed. As well, for my own life history and the history of this chicken coop, when my kids get older I can refer them to the videos and they'll see how much work went into this project to get them some pet chickens and some sustainable food for our family. So it's kind of almost like a family record as well. You know, they can look back and see their daddy in his younger years working on projects for them and for the family, and as a trade-off we get some long videos. So for those of you sticking through to the end, I really appreciate it. For those who skim through it, that's fine. That's your own prerogative, and I don't mind that. Just the fact that you're coming to check out the content at all is very appreciated. So don't worry about that. But as always, I would appreciate it as well if you did stick around and watch the whole video. But that's not for everybody, and I understand. So with all that said, today's time is going to be spent working on some plywood. But I also need to do a little more rafter work, because on the inside, when I start doing the inside end walls, I need a surface up in the peaks to nail onto, to screw onto. So as of right now, we just got a rafter at the very end of the width of the 2x4. So that leaves a gap on the inside where there's nowhere to nail the peak onto. So I want to do some more rafters on that side of the 2x4 to present a nailing surface, and I'll try to illustrate that a little bit better later with the camera. But so that's a 3.5 inch slot that I need to fill up, so it's going to involve sandwiching some plywood between the 2x4 rafters again to fill in that gap, and we'll get into that shortly. I think that's probably the first thing that I'm going to knock out, and then I can concentrate on plywood work. We still got that rear wall that's not quite filled over yet. I've got to do the outside portion of that, and that's going to be a bit of finer plunge work with the skill saw, but totally doable, obviously. Okay. So yeah, instead of rambling on, I'm just going to get started, see how much we can get done today. The time is clicking by faster than I realize some days. When I think that we're making a short video, I end up with a 40-minute long video just because so much happened that just kind of one thing ran after the other and time flew by. So the less time I spend rambling, the more practical work gets done, and that's what we'll do. Alright, let's do it. Alright, so to start off, I got my rafter template. There we go, I marked the template with good exclamation marks to make sure I don't throw this thing out. And what I'm going to do, since these are just going to be some additional rafters for the sake of nailing plywood onto, they're not really going to serve much in terms of support. So I'm going to use up some of the most gnarly 2x4s that I have. And this one is probably beyond gnarly. This thing is crowned, twisted, and just ground up on the edges. And you know what? It's hopefully going to serve the purpose. So I'll start by marking out the template, and we'll go from there. And I'm going to need 4 of these. Alright, so that's 4 rafters completed, and it actually didn't take much time at all. So now what I'm going to do is take a rafter and trace out the outline of the rafter onto some leftover plywood, and we'll cut out some plywood versions of the rafters. So then we'll be able to laminate those on, and we'll be in good shape. Alright, let's do it. So once again, I'm going to be using the template. That way the sizing is more accurate. If you take a secondary piece that you cut from your template, any small errors done in that transcribing and transfer to the next piece will get multiplied as you keep going and using the last piece in order to mark your next. So always keep your template to keep everything in unison. Alright, so now that we got our templates drawn out, we'll start doing some of the finer cutting. Alright, there we go. There's 4 of those done. You can really whip through those pretty quick once you start getting used to it. Alright, so let's get those installed. Alright, so we're inside the chicken coop right now, and you see the far end rafter. So I don't know if I can illustrate to you now that if we were trying to put a piece of plywood all the way to the peak here, there's a ledge here, obviously over twice the width of a 2x4. So we got to fill that out to have a nailing surface flush with the rest of the wall. Okay, so that's where our piece of plywood and additional rafter comes into play. So I'll take up a piece here to show you. So we will be having a piece of plywood like so, and additional rafter. So once those are in place, we'll have a nice and flush surface to nail the plywood on. There won't be any, like this here, there's nothing but rock. There's nothing there to screw onto. Whereas here, we got a nice solid header made in the peak to nail and screw on the plywood. So let's go ahead, laminate on the plywood and screw in the rafter. So we're going to be gluing both sides of the plywood. Glue the 2x4 instead of having a gluey side of the plywood on my hand. Alright, and I'm going to use these clamps to hold it in place. Let's get it all lined up. Like so. Alright, that looks good. And I'll get that screwed in. Alright, so that is completed. I finished off the other two off camera. But like I say, here's our two 2x4s with a piece of plywood sandwiched in between. And that results in a nice flat nailing surface. As well, it gives us a 3.5-inch cavity to put some insulation before we sheet the inside. So, we're getting closer. So we got this back wall here now. Going to have to get that measured out for the exterior plywood and do some cutting. And I think that's our main thing now, is plywood cutting. I think most of the framing elements, other than when we get to the roof itself, is just about done. Alright, let's keep moving forward with the plywood. Alright, so for the rear wall, we're going to do the same thing as we did for the front. And if we remember our measurements from the front, it was 62 3/4 high. I'm going to measure, see if we get the same here as well. Wow. It's actually 62 3/4. That's I didn't expect it to be exactly the same for some reason, but it is. So that's a good indicator of our work so far, is that front to back is the same. So we're going to cut a piece of plywood. Let's do 62 and no 63. Let's have an extra 1/4 inch just to make sure we get full coverage. Alright, let's do that. Alright, now I'll go inside, trace out the window, vent, and clean out door. Alright, so that's done. I also traced out the eaves as well. I forgot that part. There you go, so our tracings. So remember, this being an exterior wall, we're going to expand. The window can stay the same, the vent can stay the same, since there are not going to be any flip-up doors to it. But the clean out door below, we got to expand that around by 1/2 inch. Alright, now that we got our end wall cut, I think we're ready to pop it up. It's definitely a lot lighter than when we began. Alright, that looks great. So I'll continue screwing that in, and that'll be the last exterior wall complete. Let's do it. Alright, so that is the rear wall complete. Now we could start measuring out some interior walls, but before I do, I kind of want to be done with the outside per se. So these little bits here of the eaves, as well as the nesting box side, have no plywood yet. So I would like to remedy that. So I'm going to take my rafter template And I'm going to measure back how far on the template that I need, and I'll cut out some plywood pieces to match this. I got lots of scrap there that's fallen, especially the pieces from the vent, so I'll be able to take that and use that. So I'll do these rafter ends first, and then I'll have a look at the nesting box sides, and then we'll be further along with the outside, at least that way, before we start tackling the inside. The inside probably shouldn't be too hard, to be honest with you, and it'll probably come together rather quick because there's no expanding windows or anything like that. It's just direct tracements, plunge cuts, and done. And we're going to be laying those aside anyways, because once we got those done, we're going to start insulating and vapor barrier on the inside. So that'll be a good tedious job. But we're going to do a good job on it. Doesn't matter how tedious it is, we're going to do it right. So with that said, I'm going to get my rafter template, mark out some plywood, and cut those out, and be right back and we'll tack those in place. Alright, so we'll get that test fit up here, and that looks fine. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on it just where it's such a small piece, instead of just relying on screws with that. And I'm going to cover right to the edges as well, just for that added strength. Get that lined up, and we'll put a couple of screws in it. And there we go, that's one finished, and I'll go ahead and do the rest, just like that. Next part of the outside sheeting that I'm going to complete are the two ends of the nesting box. So that'll complete the exterior sheeting, with exception to the rest of the nesting box, which we have yet to frame. But I'm going to start off here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut a piece high enough to get to the top of here, then I'm just going to trace out this slope. But I will start off with a high enough piece, which is 23 inches, and a wide enough piece, which should be 12 inches, which it is. Alright, so 23 by 12 in plywood. I'm going to put that up against it, trace out the angle, one cut with the skill saw after that, and we should be good for the sheeting on that end piece. So this should be rather quick. So I got this piece here measured, 23 high, 12 deep, so I'll get that cut out. Now I'm just going to hold that up against the nesting box. Just like so. There we go. cut on that angle. And there we are, ready to screw in. I'm just going to go over and repeat that process now on the other side. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so that's going to finish up the video for today. We made a lot of progress. We got a lot of exterior sheeting finished off. The only parts that are left for exterior sheeting is going to be the nesting box area as well as the roof when we get to those points. But we're not ready for those just yet. So on our next episode, we're going to be tackling the inside. I know now this is probably 2 episodes where I said we're going to get to the interior walls. But we just haven't made it there yet. We've done a whole lot of tweaking on the outside, finishing that exterior sheeting, and just making sure we're ready to go inside before we do. Because once we map out those walls on the inside, we're going to get into the task of insulation and vapor barrier. So that's where we're going to begin next time. We're going to mark out the interior walls, then we'll lay them aside. We'll do our insulation and vapor barrier, and then we'll put up those walls. So until then, I hope you guys are happy, healthy, take care of each other, and peace out.